Hello, all, and welcome back to the program. It is April 13th, 2025, and we'll be discussing today Trump's immigration policy reversal relative to his mass deportations agenda. We'll also be discussing recent developments on the Trump administration's attack on free speech on college campuses. And we'll just go ahead and dig right into this. This is from the Financial Times, and this is a story that's related to the administration revoking visas, student visas. So more than 500 students have had their U.S. visas revoked in recent weeks as Donald Trump's administration doubles down on its crackdown on universities. NAFTA, a network of universities and individuals engaged in international education in exchanges, told the Financial Times on Tuesday it had identified 500 visa revocations by compiling reports in higher education institutions across the U.S. Now, as you know, conservatives for decades have been concerned about affirmative action, admissions program, high tuition costs, the views of liberal professors, and the proliferation of DEI on campuses. All issues that are important to be paying attention to, all issues that shouldn't be, they're all worthy issues for conservatives to be concerned about, is what I'm saying. These issues existed on campuses for decades. And the one thing that I would ask is why Trump wasn't galvanized in his first administration to address a lot of these issues. And of course, there are many excuses we could give for him not doing that. Okay. Maybe he didn't have the personnel to do it. Maybe he didn't have the political capital at the time. So many different rabbit holes we can go down explaining why Trump didn't do this in the first term. The reason, though, for me that he didn't do it in the first term is because what's galvanizing much of these attacks, and I'll probably say it a few more times in this program, is what happened after October 7th. It's this idea that these universities are infested with anti-Semitism, right? So all of these issues, I think, are still, in a way, partially in the center of why Trump is coming down as hard as he is on universities and student visa holders. But I think at the center of it, the fulcrum of this is his crackdown on anti-Semitism and with the administration, what they're calling anti-Semitism on campuses, or an insufficient remedy from the administration of these campuses to deal with anti-Semitism. The article goes on, Department of Homeland Security and Department of State are implementing a wave of actions against university students across the country. Institutions are often unaware that their students have been targeted, so cannot easily track their cases or offer support. State Department's visa revocation requires students to leave the U.S. and reapply for visas after fresh scrutiny. So very likely loyalty tests and situations like that. Have you now or have you ever been associated with Hamas and that kind of thing? Multiple reports have arisen of foreign students and university employees being taken to detention centers and subsequently facing deportation. Visa revocations had spiraled from students at elite universities, including Stanford, Harvard, and Columbia, to a far wider range of higher education institutions across the country. They targeted many different nationalities for a variety of reasons, including traffic violations. And so maybe, as an aside, some of this could be a way for Trump, again, to keep deportations in the news, to give the impression that he's doing more than he actually is. But I mean, 500 visa revocations is a far cry from, 10 million illegals that came into the country over the past 4 years, right? So you're also going to probably hear me say theater a lot in this program as well, because much of this, I think, is theater. Most of these people who are getting their visas revoked are going to likely have to leave the country because not all of them probably have the resources to afford the kind of representation that somebody like a high profile case like Mahmoud Khalil has right now, right? Or the girl that was snatched up from Tufts University, right, by the masked Gestapo. And so, we'll see how this shakes out, but it's very likely that, again, this stems from, like I said earlier, this push to, stamp out anti-Semitism coming from foreign students at these universities, the DEI stuff, and also the idea that, when you have these high-profile cases where students are getting their visas revoked, it still gives the public the intention, the impression that Trump is basically still on top of the mass deportation situation, right? High profiles. Let's see. I need to find where I was. On Monday, the 16 associates of U.S. universities called for a briefing from the Homeland Security and State Departments after uncoordinated orders from the authorities requesting students to self-deport. I don't know. They're talking about all these different consequences if you don't self-deport, but I don't know how many of those are going to be implemented. Maybe they have a list of people and they're telling them to self-deport, and if you don't, then we're going to find you or something. I don't know. That's interesting, though. So the group said the orders contain no additional information about how to appeal this decision or verification to ensure that mistakes are not made in identifying these individuals. The association warned of the implication for the country, given that 1 million international students attending U.S. colleges and universities have contributed an estimated $43.8 billion to the economy, created 375,000 domestic jobs, and contributed to institutions' intellectual vibrancy and the global literacy of domestic students. Now, truth is that Trump understands this. I don't think he's going to go after all of these students again, because one of the things he said last year was that he wants more H-1B visas in the country. He wants more foreign students in the country to contribute to our economy. And so do all of the tech oligarchs that he has around him, the big businesses that helped get him across the finish line. They want foreign labor. They want these students in the country, right? There is a net positive having them in the country. Again, I would argue that this is a short-lived situation, right? This is a way, basically, again, for him to save face because he's got pretty mediocre deportation numbers. And so, again, if he keeps these sort of sensational cases of students getting their visas revoked for X, Y, and Z reason at the front of the news cycle, people will still have that impression that, hey, he's still doing his thing. He's still doing the deportations. He's still keeping his promise to deport a massive amount of foreigners in this country. So I'm not buying any of it. So this is from the New York Times. This is again about college campuses or canceled colleges. To be more precise, Trump administration is seeking to exert, and many of you have probably heard about this before, but we're just going to briefly touch on this part. Trump administration is seeking to exert extraordinary influence over American universities by withholding the federal financial support that has flowed to campuses for decades. Trump and his allies contended that some schools, especially a handful of elite universities, have become bastions of anti-Semitism and ideological indoctrination. So you got anti-Semitism and ideological indoctrination. And I'm sure that many people would probably say communism, terrorist sympathizers, all of these other things. But again, at the center of most of this, these Trump withholding money from these universities, he's looking for some kind of compliance to their anti-Semitism push. So all of these initiatives, all this energy on behalf of Israel and Israeli nationals and Jewish nationals in this country. University leaders fear that by threatening to withhold funding or suspending it with little or no warning, the government is trying to stamp out academic freedom, the cornerstone of the American education system. That's true. Many people are trying to argue that this isn't about free speech and this kind of thing, but it really is. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Trump administration has given broad reasons for cuts, often involving claims that the schools tolerate anti-Semitism. But its choice of schools and even some of its demands have sometimes confused educators and experts. Northwestern University, for example, recently released a list of steps it had taken to combat anti-Semitism that closely tracked the list of demands the Trump administration gave to Columbia University. Northwest was targeted several days later anyways. So apparently it wasn't good enough. Some of these schools that are being targeted are Brown University. They could lose $510 million. Columbia, $400 million in canceled grants. Cornell University, they could be cut $1 billion. Harvard, And I'm just going to go down the list: Northwestern, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton. So these are some of the more high-profile schools that are being targeted by Trump and Israel. So dozens of other schools are under the scrutiny, largely by the Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, and are aware that some of their federal funding is imperiled. And why are they getting this money from the federal government in the first place? Well, since around the end of World War II, the U.S. government has leaned on academia to conduct research projects, and these findings trickle into the public and private sectors. A lot of research happens at these universities. A lot of these universities are tied to think tanks that are tied directly to the government that help inform the government and help shape policy and these kinds of things. So there's it's kind of a network, it's a web. That's why a lot of them get the kind of funding that they do. They help to build these universities, and their research help build policy. In other words, many big schools do indeed have big endowments. Every endowment is different. This is one of the reasons why they can't tap their endowments. Every endowment is different, and university leaders note that many donors have restricted how their money can be used, Republicans especially. So this brings us back to all of this kind of brings us back. We'll briefly touch on the case of Mahmoud Khalil. And remember, he was the Palestinian activist who attended Columbia University and participated in the anti-war demonstrations last year that were taking place on college campuses. Now, of course, we covered this story a few weeks back. Khalil was just one of several students and faculty that were detained for their perspectives on Israel's conduct relative to their ongoing war in the Gaza Strip. Now, of course, the administration in Khalil's case has asserted that because of Khalil's association with Columbia University, with the group Columbia University Apartheid Divest, that they have a right to deport him. Because apparently many in this group were arrested for, I guess the encampments. And then I think at one point they broke into one of the halls of the university itself. So some of these people were arrested. And because Khalil was the spokesman for this group, he was associated with them. Then they're trying to say that some people are trying to make the case that that's enough to get him deported, or that he was extorting the university with the demands to divest from Israel and this kind of thing, which is it's all just complete bullshit, right? These are all excuses that many on the right wing and even some on the left are trying to use as a justification for this kind of thing. It's simply put, it's a stifling of free speech, right? That's really what this boils down to. You have to look at it very simply. I've said this before, so we'll just move on. So you'll hear many argue, like I just said, about this group extorting, or because the organization occupying the campus and storming the halls of the building, even though he didn't participate in that. His association alone is enough for him to constitute a national security threat, which is, again, just complete nonsense. So important to realize these are all nonsensical explanations, and those that offer them are directly complicit in what is to come. And what I've said before is that this is going to start affecting regular citizens. Obviously, I'm not saying that regular citizens are going to be deported. I'm just saying they're going to be punished one way or another for speaking out against Israel's conduct as it relates to this war. And also, if we should go to war with Iran, speaking out against the war with Iran. They'll probably say that people who do that are anti-Semitic as well. Right. So the threshold for anti-Semitism, is basically on the floor, just like, just like it was with racism. You know what I mean? So him and others were detained and moved to several detention centers across the country before landing in Louisiana. Why are they in Louisiana? It's where, it's in the South. It's where a lot of ICE detention facilities are. He'll probably get a more favorable judge in the eyes of the administration. A judge that's more favorable to the administration's position that he can be deported and this kind of thing. With very little contact, he doesn't have much contact with his family and lawyers, which is unfortunate. His wife is pregnant, his citizen wife is pregnant that he's married to, where the administration believes they will access favorable judges. Many of these detention centers are in the South. Again, like I just said, for obvious reasons. And then just briefly here, this is talking about how a judge recently ruled that, in fact, Khalid can be removed from the country. This just came out, I think it was Friday. But the article says, an immigration judge in Louisiana found on Friday that the Trump administration could deport Mahmoud Khalil, granting the government an early victory in its efforts to crack down on pro-Palestinian demonstrations on U.S. college campuses. The ruling is far from the final word on whether Mr. Khalil, a Columbia University graduate and legal permanent resident, will be deported. His lawyers will continue their fight in Louisiana and New Jersey, arguing that he has been targeted for constitutionally protected speech. A lot of people were attacked for constitutionally protected speech and detained and locked up for many years after January 6th. And that's what many conservatives need to keep in mind, right? This shouldn't be an eye for an eye situation. And I feel that that's what Trump is turning this into. The constitutional issues at the heart of this case will most likely get a fuller hearing in federal court in New Jersey than they did in Louisiana on Friday. For the time being, the decision by the judge there, Jamie E. Commons, affirmed the extraordinary power the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has asserted to target any non-citizen for deportation. In Mr. Khalil's case, Mr. Rubio relied on a rarely cited law declaring that Colombia's graduate presence in the United States harmed the American foreign policy interests of stopping anti-Semitism. Judge Commons found the government had met the burden of evidence that the law requires, which effectively amounted to a letter from Rubio declaring that Mr. Khalil's presence in the country enabled anti-Semitism. The Homeland Security Department appears not to have submitted any other concrete evidence substantiating the claim. And we're not going to get that evidence, right? You already have half of the country or half of the MAGA supporters saying that he was a Hamas supporter. They're also saying this because he worked for that UN organization, UNRWA. That's the organization where they found, like, I think 6 or 7 people that were like allegedly part of the attacks on October 7th. I wouldn't, and of course they also say, many pro-Israeli people say that, well, they create propaganda. You should see the textbooks that UNRWA puts in schools, demeaning Israelis and stuff like that. So he works for a UN organization. He didn't disclose it on his green card application, I guess. I don't know why he would do that. I think that he applied before October 7th, but they're saying that, well, he worked for them. That's what most of them are saying right now. Again, the hoops that people will jump through to make this look like this guy should be deported for all these different things. They just don't realize that they're just tightening the noose around their neck, especially citizens, because soon, and maybe they don't care, maybe nobody cares, that, hey, in the future, if you criticize any war in the Middle East that happens on behalf of Israel, then you could be in trouble. You could be detained. You could end up like a political prisoner or something like that. That's what it's going to lead to. Forget about it. We'll just move on. Let's see. This is from the judge, I believe. Actually, no. This is from Khalil. He made a statement here. I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. He said, clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present or in the whole process. Immigration judges. So let's go on here. Immigration judges are employees of the executive branch, not the judiciary, which is important when we look at this ruling, and often approve the Homeland Security Department's deportation efforts. It would be unusual for such a judge serving the U.S. Attorney General to grapple with the constitutional questions raised by Mr. Khalil's case. And I think that in general, judges are going to be reluctant to challenge the Secretary of State on these issues. It's a national security issue. And so I don't think it's going to be, maybe not, in New Jersey, but like it said, courts are reluctant to move into that territory and kind of determine what is a threat to our national security, like the Secretary of State would do. So Andrew McCarthy wrote a piece about this for National Review a couple weeks ago, and he talks a little bit about that. And that's why he's of the impression that, the Trump administration will probably win this case and Khalil will get deported. So the rest of this just kind of talks about the proceeding. So in a nutshell, basically, this judge says that he can be deported. And then he's got a pending case in Louisiana. I'm sure all of this is going to be appealed, and it's probably going to end up in the Supreme Court. And that will be interesting to see, just because of how divided the court has been on certain issues lately, especially Trump's best friend, Amy Coney Barrett. So we'll see. So some notes here. Is this about a general need to reduce immigration? Is all of this about reducing immigration and the alien presence in the U.S., or is this about anti-Semitism, Israel, and the Israel lobby, making sure Jews feel comfortable in the country. I think it's the latter, and it's unfortunate, but and like I said, you can make a case for all those other reasons, but I think that's pretty much squarely where this falls. There was no kind of aggression like this in Trump's first administration when it came to immigration, unfortunately. After all, there's a major push presently from certain admin officials for an open war with Iran. What better way to sell that to the American people, or what better way to conduct that war or to see that war through, bombing Iran with Israel, like we said earlier? What better way to see that through than by saying, okay, on the domestic front, by stifling all dissent, right? Basically stifling all protest to the war, right? And calling it anti-Semitic if you protest the war. Because after all, us bombing Iran will be, hey, that's Israel protecting itself, right? You don't want Israel to protect itself? That's anti-Semitic. How can you sell yet another round of American intervention in another country? Like I just said, kill dissent early. And we also need to consider the following statements Trump gave Thursday related to deportations. That's what we're going to be getting to next. That's the last portion of the video. Now, when we take a look at Tom Homan, Botox Barbie, Kristi Noem, in her photo ops deporting so-called un-American or anti-Semitic students, I think this is all theater. Like I said earlier, it's the idea that, hey, if we put these sensational things on the front, it's going to basically mask the fact that we probably have deportation numbers that are similar to Biden or Obama. There's nothing significant or mass about these deportations that Trump is doing. So, and I like Homan. Homan is all right. Okay. I think he's a badass. And he wrote a book a while back. I suggested it's called Defending the Border and Save Lives. He wrote that about 5 years ago. I was into Homan because at that time I was really into doing research on the border and border security. And I think years before that, I read another one. It was about Fast and Furious, and that's the gun running that the ATF was doing with Mexico with the cartels. Also a good book. They have a couple books that's been written on that situation. So I've been following Homan for a while, but I truly thought he'd make a better head of DHS than Botox Barbie Kristi Noem. I'm sick of seeing all the photo ops with her. It's getting ridiculous. And that's why I call it theater. Like, it's a very serious thing, the border situation. And Homan is a serious guy, and he's like a no-nonsense guy. He would have been the perfect head. They say he didn't have enough experience. I don't know what experience Noem has, though. What experience do Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski have? With what do they have? I mean, I see the two of them on an aircraft together, a helicopter, taking photos. There's this idea that Kristi Noem is, helping out with raids and stuff like that. They have her taking pictures with rifles. I'm like, what are we doing here? Right? I get it, though. It's, again, they're selling something to the American people that really isn't happening. So it is what it is. But again, I think that really in this next story proves that this is our last story. The business community has spoken, and they don't want these mass deportations, right? So again, all of the things that you're seeing, the raids and, this stuff with the campuses and all this stuff, theater, right? And again, look, there is a way to do the immigration thing. I've always said it. Right? I've always said there's a way to do it. Deportations is but one tool, but the most difficult thing is legislation, something sustainable, something that goes through Congress. I know that Trump doesn't want to do that, but it's so important and crucial to do it that way, because this way, you'll be good after you get out of office, right? The situation will remain the same after you get out of office, unless it's overturned by 3/4 of Congress, and that's difficult. So policy needs to be, sealed into legislation. It takes time and patience, which I know that Trump doesn't. I know he only has 4 years, but that's what we need more of. I said the deportations thing, you're going to be caught up in the courts for a long time with this kind of thing. Some of them you'll get them out, and it'll be, I guess, a political victory for your base. But some of us just want actual results, long-term results, sustainable results, so that we don't have another administration that lets in 10 million people or more. So, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Given our last story here, this is from Breitbart, and I was kind of late to this. I think it came out on Thursday. I think Trump gave these statements Thursday, and I think I heard about it like Friday afternoon or something. But we're going to go through this line by line. So if you don't want to hear it, turn it off if you haven't already. But this is important. So he's backsliding on deportations. So President Trump used his cabinet meeting today to outline, this was Thursday, I believe, his plans to recall some of the illegals he is deporting from jobs in the farm and hospitality sectors. I wonder what some means. Trump says, it's a very big deal, a big self-deportation operation that we're starting. He told the cabinet, we're going to work with people so that if they go out in a nice legal way, they voluntarily go out nicely and go back to their country, we're going to work with them right from the beginning on trying to get them back in legally. So it gives them a real incentive to leave. Otherwise, they can never come back. That's putting American workers first, by the way. The exit and return process may take 60 days, Trump suggested. Just enough time to say to the American public and in the media, hey, all these people are leaving. Our deportations, our mass deportations are working. The threats are working. In a conversation with Kristi Noem, chief of the Department of Homeland Security, Trump said, we're also going to work with farmers that if they have strong recommendations for their farms for certain people, which are going to be all the foreign workers on their farms, we're going to let them stay in for a while and work with the farmers and go through a process, a legal process. But we have to take care of our farmers and hotels owners and people that own a lot of land and people that own commercial real estate and hotels and stuff like this. They got to take care of them. Screw the worker, right? The American worker I'm talking about. But we have to take care of our farmers and hotels, those farmers that can actually afford equipment, that can do all those things that they have illegals do. Many of them that just don't want to buy the equipment. It's just what it is. Various places where they need the people. And we're going to work with you very carefully on that. So a farmer will come in with a letter concerning certain people saying they're great, they're working hard. We're going to slow it down a little for them. And then we're going to ultimately bring them back. What does slow it down mean? Hey, I have these people right now on my farm. Here's a list of them. Can I just leave them here? The administration will say, what people? Turn the other way. They'll go out and they're going to come back as legal workers. Pie in the sky, right? I think it's very important, Trump added. So, I mean, I can go on. This is what I'm talking about. Are we serious? Right? Where are the priorities right now? Allegedly anti-Semitic people on a campus. The right thing is, getting deporting gang members and stuff like that. I like that part. And then you have this initiative, right? So, this article goes on. I have to read a little bit more of this. Trump is facing pressure from real estate investors and hotel operators whose stock market wealth slumps when pay raises reduce projected profits. For example, he said, farmers can import as many farm workers as they wish via the H-2A program, but H-2B for manual laborers has caps. H-2A is doable because it's an unlimited program, but H-2B has numerical caps. And so there's a limit to how much they can do. This isn't from the president. This is from an analyst. The president says different things at different times, but if it is applied widely, it makes it much harder for less skilled workers, immigrants, or Americans to bargain for better wages. Farmers are also reluctant to invest heavily in untested machinery, in part because loans are risky and farm income drops. I get it. I mean, they can afford it, like I said, but I can understand the reservations in investing in those things. But more of them need to actually do that or, figure it out. So what is Trump effectively floating? This is essentially an amnesty that he's talking about, right? In all but name only. Okay. And it will likely take place just as he's saying, and it won't be broadcast by many people. I might broadcast it if it doesn't go, if it doesn't go unnoticed for me, but pretty annoying, honestly. Everybody's going to ignore this. They're going to say trust the plan, but this is what I'm talking about, right? It's only been 3 months, okay? So far, we have immigrants like gang members breaking the law being deported. And again, I agree with that. Just reiterating what I said earlier. And we have political dissidents like Khalil and many of these students that are protesting Israel's savage and brutal war in the Gaza Strip. They're being deported. No reason for that. That's just a violation of their free speech rights. And most normal Americans would disagree with it. And especially the ones that were imprisoned on January 6th. Now we have everybody else, essentially the bulk of immigrants that Trump told us would make up mass deportation, being told they can leave and just come back when the farmers and hotels are ready for them. Now, this is your Trump immigration policy. And I'm not surprised. I knew the American worker would just continue to come last. But we'll see how this develops, right? Let's hope we get the priorities in the right place. You know what I mean? But I can't see that happening. I'm not optimistic. Anyways, thanks for joining. Like, subscribe, leave a comment if there's any suggestions. Let me know. Nobody comments, but somebody decides to and give me a suggestion, especially on sound. Just let me know. Thanks.